Perfect. Okay, so thank you guys so much for spending your lunch hour with us. We've got people popping in from all over the state. It's wonderful to have you guys here with us today, and we value and appreciate your time. I'm looking at who's popping into the webinar right now. It's exciting to see so much representation from so many parts of the state. Just glancing through, I see like Coos Bay, North Bend, Reedsport. There's a lot coming from Eugene, Eastern Oregon's here. I see Roseburg, Astoria, Sandy. Reedsport, that's awesome. A lot coming from the Salem area. That's fantastic. More Roseburg, see some people from McMinnville, Southern Oregon, Eastern, some Central, John Day River territories here. I see Umatilla County. It's so great to have you guys. Thank you guys so much for making time here. I see a lot of people coming out of the Portland area. There's some Oak Ridge. It's so great to have you. So I think we've got most everyone's going to be joining us. There's a few more people popping in, but let's just go ahead and get started and dive in. So first, hi everyone, my name is Alexa. I'm excited to kind of walk you through some of these initial pieces to the marketing webinar today. First, welcome. We're excited to have you for today's Destination Marketing and COVID-19 webinar. So for today's session, we're going to be looking at planning for recovery with a marketing lens. You'll hear a lot about trends and forecasts in destination marketing, hear about how Travel Oregon is preparing for recovery, and see examples of how businesses are working to safely welcome back visitors. Before we jump in, let's talk about a few kind of key ways to make sure that you're going to get the most out of today. First, regarding questions, we're going to be using the Q&A feature that's within your Zoom screen. Feel free to enter a question if there's something with broad applicability to participants today. Well, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions. We do have staff that'll be attempting to answer as many as possible throughout today's session. And there will also be a few minutes held at the end of today's webinar to be able to address several of the questions that have been submitted. You can see that this webinar is being recorded for just an opportunity to reflect more or as a chance for people that weren't able to join us today. This is going to be shared through the industry website and through a follow-up email to you and through our industry e-news. So we'd also really encourage you to make sure that you're signed up for the industry e-news, just because so much information about resources and details from this webinar and a lot of the programming that's coming in August and September is going to be captured there. And this marketing webinar today is just the beginning. Be sure to take this information and apply it to your business or your organization. Part of that really involves building and continuing to forge those relationships within the tourism industry for your community, for your region. As a business or organization, it's really important to reach out to your local destination marketing or management organization in your area. For example, that could be like if you're in Condon, the Condon Chamber of Commerce, if you're in like Coos Bay, North Bend area, like Coos Bay, North Bend, BCB, or the Cannon Beach Chamber, those type of entities. Especially because those entities really funnel up to our regional destination marketing and management organizations. So you just need to know which of Oregon's 7 regions you're in. That's available on our industry website. Those entities would be like the Oregon Coast Visitors Association or the Central Oregon Visitors Association or Willamette Valley. So 3 ways to make sure you're maximizing today. Make sure you're asking questions if that's helpful. Know that these resources are going to be posted on the industry website and there's a recording, and make sure to take advantage of building those connections even during COVID-19 with your destination marketing organization and your RDMO. So now I'd like to introduce you to some of the presenters that you're going to be hearing from today. We have 4 Travel Oregon staff from our global marketing team who will be sharing some great data and trends, as well as recommendations and strategies for marketing during this public health crisis. First, we have LaDan Garamani, who's from our marketing research team. We have Katy Clair, who's our director of the Global Marketing Services, Mo Sheriftine, who's our director of Global Integrated Marketing, and Bryan Mullaney, who is our Insights and Planning Manager within the Marketing, Insights, and Visitor Services team. And we have the opportunity to bring you Todd Skelton from TripAdvisor, who's going to share some great additional perspective on where to focus your additional marketing efforts right now. So for today, we're going to be diving into some specific impacts around the impact of COVID-19 on the travel industry. You'll hear from our staff around our organization's marketing approach and strategies to help with recovery and resiliency for Oregon's tourism industry. And it's important to us to be able to provide specific examples and strategies for today of how to highlight recommendations. So you'll get very tangible examples of where to focus your marketing efforts right now. We're excited to bring this information to you, and there's a lot to cover in this hour together. So let's get started. I'm going to pass to LaDan. She's going to share some insights and data into what lies ahead.
Thanks, Alexa. Hi, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on how Oregon tourism industry has been impacted by COVID-19. Looking at the economic impacts of Oregon tourism industry in 2019, right prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that the tourism economy was booming. In fact, in 2019, we marked the 10th consecutive year of growth in travel spending and also visitation. As you can see here, the industry employed 117,500 Oregonians, a 39% increase over 2003, which is the year that legislature established Travel Oregon. And we also saw a total visitor spending of 12.8 billion, which was 97% increase over 2003. Tourism also generated 592 million in 2019 in local state tax revenue. Next slide, please. Of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, this long run of prosperity is over now. As you can see here, based on the preliminary estimates that was provided by Mullaney and Associates for calendar year 2020, direct travel spending for the state is down a total of 53%, with most of loss happening in the second quarter of the year. These estimates are obviously preliminary and they're year to date, and they're subject to change as the new data arrives. Next slide, please. So earlier in the pandemic, STR predicted that Oregon's overall revenue per available room would be down 53% for fiscal year 2021 compared to the fiscal year 2018-2019, which is the baseline here. But what we are looking at here is a comparison of actual versus the forecast was provided by STR. And for the second, and this is for the second half of 2019-20 fiscal year. The good news is that for the past couple of months, we're tracking about 25% ahead of the STR forecast. And we hope to continue to outpace their projections for this fiscal year. So far, for the first week of fiscal 2021, we're still outpacing the predicted drop by about 21%, which is 49% actual versus 70% forecasted. It's also a similar story, as you can see here in the charts below, for occupancy. Actual performance is outpacing the predictions. However, what you're not seeing here, the ADR, average daily rates, actuals are tracking with the forecast, which predicts ADR to be down 21% this year. Next slide, please. Looking at hotel results for week ending 18 July, which is the most recent data that we have available, we are seeing that each of Oregon's 7 tourism regions are down in 3 key metrics: average daily rate, RevPAR, and occupancy. These year-over-year declines are remaining significant, as we all know. However, they are not as severe as the levels that were recorded in April. occupancy for all the regions has risen now over week for 13 of 14 weeks that we've been tracking. We have some partners and regions that are reporting close to or even normal occupancy numbers now. As you can see here, specifically for Coast and Central Oregon, they surpassed a 65% occupancy and about $90 in revenue during the week of July 12. However, from this chart, it's also easy to see that Portland region is struggling with a decline of over 75% in their revenue. And as we know, Portland has 36% of the rooms available per night in the state of Oregon. It has the single largest impact on the overall Oregon results. And now I hand it over to my colleague, Bryan, to cover some of the other data sources that we've been tracking. Thanks.
Thank you, LaDan. As a major contributor to website traffic, one of the metrics that Travel Oregon has been watching closely is our year-over-year organic search traffic. We feel that organic search is a good barometer for identifying consumer interest traveling to or within Oregon. You can see here that our organic search numbers year-over-year dropped off starting in late March. Good news is that our numbers rebounded in late May and started to surpass the prior year in June. This confirms our hunch that consumers are still interested and eager to travel to Oregon, and that they are using this time to plan upcoming trips. Since the start of the calendar year, our year-over-year organic search traffic is up 4.5%, despite the negative effects of COVID-19. Another major contributor to the recovery of the tourism industry in Oregon is flights in and out of the PDX airport. Working with TSA and the Port of Portland, we've been tracking the year-over-year change in throughput of TSA's departure checkpoints at PDX. To clarify, this is the number of people that are flying out of PDX. You can see in early March, with the arrival of COVID-19 in Oregon, that our year-over-year throughput took a nosedive, culminating in a low point in early April, showing a 96.3% year-over-year decline. Since then, we're seeing a slow recovery as consumer confidence in airline travel continues to ebb and flow. Ultimately, the return of consumer confidence in airline travel will be key to the long-term recovery of the tourism industry. And now I'll pass it over to Mo to give you some social insights.
Thanks, Bryan. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to walk you through some of the social trends and chatter we're seeing. So one of the things we've been doing over the past 5 months is working with our social agency, Sparkloft Media, and using internal tools to look at what people are saying, both within and outside of Oregon, about COVID-19 and what it means for travel and just overall sentiment when it comes to these issues. The reason we do this is to gauge perceptions and to ensure that we can use any insights we're seeing from social to drive messaging and content. So, you all know this and you see it all the time. Social media chatter is kind of a barometer of what's happening in the world. And it's really interesting to see how kind of this collective human pulse can tell a larger societal story. So just do a quick methodology on this. We use kind of a broad set of keywords to look at publicly accessible social media accounts and blogs. And then using platforms like Crimson Hexagon and Keyhole, we kind of look at sentiment analysis of what people are saying. So the way Sparkloft describes it, this story really unfolds in 5 stages, right? So the first stage is our pre-COVID era of denial in January and February, when the virus was kind of this thing that was raging in the Wuhan province, South Korea, Hong Kong, and really not on people's minds at that point. Oregon's first case happened around February 28th in Washington County, And then we slowly see a small uptick, and that's when the governor first convened the COVID-19 task force. Things then slowly started to change in early March. As caseload starts to spike up, things start to heat up. So you see the volume getting louder with this purple line as we all collectively realize that this pandemic has come home, and kind of that general unease starts to set in. And there are some significant milestones here. So March 6th was when South by Southwest canceled for the first time ever. We also had March 8th when the state of emergency was declared in Oregon. And then Washington starts banning, gatherings of 250 people or more. And then they also order all schools to go into distance learning mode. And then, the dam starts to break. March 12th and through the 20th is what we call the panic stage. It really gets real here, right? So the NBA, the NHL, March Madness, and other sports start postponing their seasons. Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson say that they're infected with COVID-19, and it really became clear that life was just about to change. In Oregon, this is when the governor declared a moratorium on events larger than 250 people, and on March 12th, and this was followed by, all the event cancellations, school closures, et cetera. And so we enter the period we call quarantine, March 21st to April 17th, roughly. And, we start with a stay-at-home order on the March 23rd. And this was following that sunny weekend. That was a beautiful spring day, spring weekend, crowded beaches on the coast, summer level traffic in the gorge. And on social media that weekend, we immediately saw this spike, right? So the reaction was immediate. Locals kept posting pictures of just crowded highways, overcrowded trails and beaches. And we really immediately mobilized our resources to kind of bring home that stay-at-home messaging. And Katy will have some examples later on down the line here. And so this is when we started seeing some kind of new behaviors and trends emerge, which I'll also get into the next few slides. Things like live streaming, work and school from home, food to go only from restaurants, everything just being canceled. And this is also, unfortunately, the time when the travel industry gets hit really hard, right? Unemployment and layoffs start to become reality. And we saw this across the industry with kind of big names across the state, McMiniman, Sun River, Powell's, Shakespeare Festival, just to name a few, start to close up. And so we go into quarantine. This becomes, at first it's a novelty, right? So we do these Zoom dance parties, happy hours, Zoom backgrounds become a thing. Amazon and Netflix streaming just skyrockets. And there's it's novel, but it's also, there's this real sense of appreciation of the medical community, first responders, frontline staff. And there's this real sense of solidarity and in this together mentality, as we look out for seniors, small business owners, and others in the community. From our content perspective, like many of you, we focused our stories to offer hope and resiliency. So to show, just to show our audience how you can still enjoy Oregon from home. So things like online events, ways to promote health businesses, DIY resources, and also things like podcasts and documentaries. And while this resilience was really sustained, there was also this growing unease and frustration as we enter the frustration period. We start to realize that this was not like a 2-month or 4-week quarantine, right? This is not, things were not going to be going back to normal anytime soon. The novelty of live streams starts to wear off. The weather is getting warmer. Counties are slowly going into gradual reopening, and public lands are being reopened again. And so we start to get outside and travel. And as public lands opened up and counties kind of moved into their phased reopening stages, our content plan shifted. And we kind of morphed into more education and information. So kind of showing people exactly what they could do and all the guidelines they had to follow, such as social distancing, new protocols for businesses and mask use, et cetera. But, even as things got better, there was this underlying tension and polarization about a host of things, such as, prolonged lockdowns, mask usage, county opening plans. We saw protests everywhere from, the seaside to the gorge to Portland. people were just getting really frustrated and over the quarantine period. So then we get to the point in the chart where Memorial Day weekend happens and the killing of George Floyd, takes national stage. It became a really huge inflection point, and for a period of time, for about 2 weeks there, we saw Black Lives Matter conversations just overtaking everything COVID, which is remarkable to watch. It soon became clear that there was this new recognition and consciousness about social justice issues. Support for Black Lives Matter is at its highest levels right now, according to Pew Research. With 2/3 of U.S. adults expressing support for the movement. And the support is also driving huge consumption trends. So in June alone, if you look at content across platforms, Netflix, Amazon, New York Times bestseller list, et cetera, messages about fighting systemic racism, driving social change are what's driving the consumption habits there. From a travel perspective, this heightened awareness is also what's driving our renewed focus on, focus on equity content, such as Black-owned businesses across the state, traveling while Black, and then diversity in the outdoors. And so this kind of brings us to the current period. So we are kind of entering this media climate, a social climate where kind of the two dominant stories are COVID and Black Lives Matter and social justice. And so as we get to summer, the urgency that led most of us to kind of lock down in March and April, that urgency has kind of subsided a little bit, and we're going back into this period of denial and unease and panic. And we feel like this cycle will repeat itself as caseload spikes. We're at 4 million infections across the country now, and we see this whole pattern repeating itself as Oregonians take steps to reduce the spread and further prevent infections. Next slide, please. So let's talk a few trends that we're seeing. So we all know COVID-19 completely upended our lives. Surviving the pandemic has resulted in a massive shift in behavior. And really, while it's hard to predict which of these changes will stick into long-term shifts, there's no doubt that a shift is happening, especially when you consider that, experts tell us that, when you do something different and change behavior for about 60 days, it becomes a permanent thing. And we've been in quarantine for now, 4 or 5 months now. And so there's definitely a shift happening. So the first, so the first thing is kind of the new normal of travel, right? So from the Oregon Zoo to restaurants and kayak shops to tasting rooms, we're all slowly kind of getting conditioned to the new behaviors of booking ahead, contactless transactions, curbside pickups and delivery. And for those of us who kind of like to go with the flow, this has been kind of a mind-bending change for sure. The next thing is kind of media consumption, which I touched on earlier. As expected, quarantine has made things like Instagram stories, TikTok, Snapchat, and other streaming devices like Netflix have seen surging usage. And while podcasts saw an initial drop in March and April, mostly driven by people commuting less, it's kind of picked back up again. The other thing I wanted to call out is Instagram stories and Zoom have particularly, enjoyed a huge renaissance during this quarantine period, as many celebrities like DJs like, Questlove and Patrick Stewart have used these platforms to kind of as a substitute for live performances. One noteworthy thing here is that while live streams were all the rage in March, April, and May, there's fatigue for sure right now with that fatigue combined with like social justice protests and warmer weather has resulted in a lot of them just losing steam and audience over the past 2 months. And the other interesting thing here is that Instagram is now on course to overtake Twitter as the source of news within the next year. So that's an interesting change we see that emerged during quarantine. Finally, on this slide, I want to touch on, if you saw friends posting pictures of their sourdough breads and cinnamon rolls over the last few months, like many of mine did, why DIY and food, there's a new kind of consciousness about home cooking, gardening, and homesteading. It's kind of making a comeback as we deal with the restlessness of isolation and the threat of a crumbling food chain, especially with the infections climbing at meatpacking plants and seafood factories. We see that Americans have shifted their purchase habits to community-driven alternatives closer to home. So buying direct from farmers markets, for example, like even in Oregon, there's the What's Good app that allow you to buy from farmers markets remotely. And we also see a change in consumption habits. Meat consumption has gone down, whereas meat alternatives are going up. And we're also seeing a return to old school systems like bartering and gifting. So all of this baking and local human-to-human focus indicates that a desire to feel in control and helpful and being connected to your community is really, in a time of uncertainty, is what's driving this change. Next slide, please. So outdoors, we know this from kind of all the remote public lanes that are overcrowded right now. But you know, retail numbers from camping and booking services confirm that there are huge spikes in businesses. You know, kayak sales and camping businesses. You know, some seeing like 400% increases over last year. And even bike retailers across the country have seen significant increases. So. For example, the CEO of Trek Bike said that when stay-at-home orders came forth in March, there was this mini bike boom, and for a while there, you couldn't even find an adult bike at Southeast Portland, like at Target and Walmart. It was huge. There were huge run on bikes. So we know that people are venturing out to public lands. They're doing healthy things like biking and kayaking and camping, and in the long run, this is probably a good thing for mental health and just overall health and tourism. But the question remains, will this be kind of a flavor of the month, or is this something that, you know, as time passes is going to stay? At this point, it's unclear, but from a content standpoint, we're addressing this by kind of showcasing more basic things, such as, you know, DIY bike repairs, beginner trails, places you could kayak with your family safely, etc. Let's see. So the next one is, the one thing I wanted to call out here is that while people are venturing out, they're also reluctant to post on social media. So they're being really self-conscious about mask use or non-usage and just kind of, you know, taking pleasure during a time of pandemic. So we see this new consciousness about sharing on social when you're out on vacation or venturing outside. The next kind of trend, which we are all seeing, is road trips, right? We're all looking to hit the road this year, and this fact is reflected in how RV sales and rentals are just through the roof, about 170% in some parts of the country, according to the RV Industry Association. You know, as we all seek out those socially distant road trip experiences. The same trend is also holding up for camper and RV rentals. RV Share, which is a peer-to-peer service, is reporting a 650% surge in year-over-year bookings. And there's absolutely no doubt that 2020 is becoming the year of the summer road trip. And you see this kind of reflected across categories from, you know, everyone from hotels, Les Schwab, and car sales are all talking about taking that summer road trip. And kind of the final point here is, you know, trust is in institutions and authoritative sources are up. A YouGov survey of consumers in 40 media markets show that COVID-19 has resulted in more people than ever who are willing to pay for news. Broadcast news coverage is up, broadcast consumption is up, and also kind of the trust in authority has been extended to especially healthcare professionals and public agencies managing the pandemic. The other interesting trend here is that doctors and nurses have taken it upon themselves to put their reputation on the line and really talk about what it means to, you know, just providing that raw, unfiltered view into ground zero and what's happening on the ground. So kind of showing that the impact from COVID is real and this is just not, you know, a normal flu. And so from a content standpoint, I think it's a huge opportunity for us to align with official sources or medical professionals in your community to ensure that these safety messages are being heard. So now I'm going to hand this off to Katy, who will walk you through Travel Oregon's marketing approach and recovery strategies.
Everyone, I'm gonna go, we're running a little bit behind, and so just letting you all know that if you have any questions, we'll make sure to answer them in chat or follow up at the end. But I just wanted to share a little bit about where Travel Oregon, Mo covered quite a bit with some of the insights. Mo, LaDan, and Bryan, they covered the insights that have helped formed where we are, where we've been, and where we're going to go. And so with that, I think that we all have the common understanding that tourism marketing over the last 4 months has clearly been a little bit of a challenge. And defining where we're going to go, I feel like the most commonly used words have changed a little bit, but I think it's like every time someone says pivot or something like that, that's been pretty common in all of our meetings. So in April, we had a lot of excitement. We were bringing our Only Slightly Exaggerated campaign to Los Angeles. And as I think many of you know, we had to pull that campaign completely. And as we work through this summer, I'm going to show some examples of how this has come to life. But we've really taken what Mo was saying with aligning with official sources, a lot of information that we pulled from the Oregon Health Authority and OHSU to help us inform of appropriate trends and appropriate travel information to push out to consumers, because that's really the fine line that I think everyone has been walking, is how do we engage with non-essential travel? What's the appropriate level of encouragement and invitation to your community? And how do you maintain that as a tourism organization that wants to invite people in, with balancing the government and health regulations and information that helps make responsible decisions that protect community health? So it's definitely something that we're all in and balancing together. And I'd like to share a little bit about how Travel Oregon has been going through that. And I think one thing that I'll be showing is that we have been looking at how does this evolve into a campaign. And in full transparency and honesty, until last week, we were looking to launch an advertising campaign in early August, and we've had to pivot on that decision, permanently moving that campaign until next spring. And so I want to share a little bit of insights of where we were and where we think we're going to be going long term in the industry. And then I'll share the short term view of the next 3 to 6 months. So long term, we're looking at a situation where the entire world is on pause. While the global pandemic has stopped us from moving, it hasn't stopped us from dreaming of the day when we can travel. We want to tap into that feeling with a message that'll inspire Oregonians to explore Oregon once we're free to roam again. And so the strategy that's going to be driving our long-term work is lifting your state up by exploring it. We want to support, people want to support their community now more than ever. And we want to make Oregon feel local and inspire Oregonians to explore their community, this massively gorgeous state. This work, and again, I'm saying long-term because we need to launch, when we launch our advertising campaign, we have to be really clear with our advertising dollars that we can have a message that it's appropriate to have a travel now, book now message that can be in market for long term over an 8 to 12 week period. And what we've seen and what we learned from COVID over the last 4 weeks in particular is that this is going to be an evolving situation with cases and how it's transmitted. There's going to be government regulations that will impact that. And so what we've looked at moving forward from our marketing team is really that we're going to be focusing the next 3 to 6 months on tourism safety and resiliency. So I'm pulling up my notes. What we must prioritize is to influence responsible visitor behavior to promote community health, and that results in tourism businesses remaining open. We have an extremely strong interest in making sure that responsible behaviors are participated in, and so that tourism businesses can remain open and non-essential travel can continue as it currently is, as we see the trends that LaDan shared earlier. We do know that people are traveling around the state, and I'm sure some of our partners are able to share that. And so we want to make sure, as much as we're able to, we can influence those behaviors with responsible, to be responsible, to understand nuances and insights for how to patron businesses and what people can expect. So this is where we'll be putting our paid marketing efforts over the next 3 to 6 months. With our paid proactive outreach, this is going out into the consumer marketplace with how to travel safely this summer, fall, and winter, why it's important to follow these safety protocols, and where people can learn more. This is a good example of how we're going to be looking to partner with experts in the field, including land managers, healthcare professionals, and driving to that resource that we can establish within TravelOregon.com. And then what we're calling here as a paid reactive is making sure that Travel Oregon as a brand and a resource is present when people are looking for information about travel. So this is on social media, paid search, and on online travel agencies. this message is really going to be about safe travel, and again, driving back to that resource on traveloregon.com. So for many partners, this might be, well, this is what Travel Oregon has already been doing a little bit, and this is also what our agency has been doing. And I'd just like to encourage that, yes, it is what we've been doing, and we're going to continue to do so in a really thoughtful way. So this includes what Mo was referencing earlier, is the education and safety. And as a DMO or as tourism business or an RDMO, we really encourage this as a resource, because this is how you're translating the information and government regulations for your area so that tourism visiting consumers understand the behaviors expected of them and what to expect within your destination. I think these are some really great examples of the different levels that this can be done. Traveling County has the what to expect at local hotels. And then this is from Travel Medford. This is just even as it can indicate on social posts of, you can see the end here, stay safe, stay distance. And then this is another, again, I have a couple examples here of just really great examples of this, of how are you making sure that this information is featured on the homepage of your business listing or DMO. The Five Pine has just a really great information that quickly shows that they're responding to COVID, that they're taking protocols, that they're taking, and they're making sure that that's very apparent in your booking with them and your experience when you're there. And then this is a really great fly-in from the Cannery Pier Hotel that just has real quick and information that you can get to about what they're doing to be safe within COVID. Another thing, and again, this is how we're pulling in all the information that was referenced earlier and the outputs that you're seeing within our channels. So as we know, people are really interested in outdoor recreation. I'm one of those people that bought an RV. I also bought a bike, so I can very much attest to that. And so there's a lot of questions of, how do I do this? Where can I go? What can I access? And so within that, it's recognizing COVID, and then it's also giving and providing relevant information about, what does this mean for you? Where can you go? So this is on Travel Oregon's channels that will continue to re-emphasize and push moving forward. But there's also some great examples here of partners that we continue to recommend that this is the type of information to weave into your messaging. So this is great from Visit Bend. I love this example too, because we don't talk about it a lot. People talk about poop, right? It's a thing that happens when you go outdoors, and Visit Bend just tackled it head on. It's kind of funny, and they called it out. But I think this is also a really great reference from the Oregon coast that indicates something new that's come from COVID, information about how it'll impact your visit and their ask when you enter their community. It's done with a great photo, and then it has a clear message when you see it. Another resource and something that we'll continue to push throughout our channels is the Take Care Out There messaging. This is done with the Outdoor Recreation Network, and these are resources that are available to all partners on the Office of Outdoor Recreation Toolkit webpage. But you can see here that this messaging system is used to clearly convey these information that's more important than ever during COVID, and that we know from experiences that we've been hearing from land management and consumers that these are messages that will need to continue to be reinforced moving forward. So quick, clear information about staying local. This is from back in what was the phase, Mo, that was officially described during the first stage of reopening of no groups more than 10 people. And then this is something from state parks that just clearly defines what they're asking you to do. And then the last thing that I wanted to just call out with the Take Care Out There campaign, and we'll provide links to this information, is that the beaver has been updated to be masked, because we know that this is going to be something that's important moving forward. And then one of the other messages that has been continued to Travel Oregon has been sharing, as well as partners, is the Stay Local, Support Local. So this is going to be, many partners have done it, but it continues as tourism marketers, is really giving people key insights of how to support your community and giving it, these are examples from Travel Oregon about enjoy Memorial Day at home, but I think being really clear and inspirational with that. I think Visit Central Oregon did an excellent job with this, of the Eat Well, Eat Local. And then Eugene Cascades Coast as well. They're doing an entire marketing effort that is targeted within their county. And Natalie and Stephen and Emily Forche can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is this is a really great effort because you're looking at what are the tourism behaviors that you're looking to influence. A staycation, who's your target, your local community within your county. How are you going to do that with inspirational imagery, reminders to stay local, and you can get a little bit more paid targeting on social media. And then lastly, this is another message that you're going to continue seeing come from Travel Oregon, and an effort that we'd really recommend for all partners as you look forward is if you do have messages of stay home, explore Oregon later, how are you making sure that you have that follow through, that next step? And I think an effort that we saw from the Willamette Valley Visitors Association in May with Oregon Wine Month is that even though it was at a point where it couldn't consistently be a message of come now, book now, it was definitely a message of how to engage with their destination. And then they had a contest, a sweeps type promotion that was going on. So they're able to gather the leads to have those conversations later. Bryan can give you a better hype speech than I am about why leads are so important, but that's definitely an effort that Travel Oregon is going to be making, especially this fall, as far as how are we making sure that we're gathering consumer information so that we can continue to have these inspiring conversations and a plan now, visit later conversation throughout this fall and winter. So with that, it's just a little bit of insights of examples of messages that we think are really compelling, and that as Travel Oregon is reconfirming our direction for the next 3 to 6 months in a more official way, we will be connecting with that over to all of our regional destination management organizations. We'll be sharing on our industry website. And so we really encourage you, as Alexa said at the beginning, to connect to those resources, and we'll continue to share information there. But at this time, I need to get his official website out, bio. So I'm going to hand it over to Todd Skelton right now. Todd is a great travel partner with Travel Oregon. He's worked with TripAdvisor for 9 years, and he's based out of Santa Cruz, California. He manages a team that works primarily with destination marketing organizations and nonprofits. I'm going to skip a little bit here. Before he broke into the media space, Todd owned automotive performance shop, taught scuba diving, and worked as a research diver in the island of, I'm going to say this wrong, Morea, collecting clownfish. My 2-year-old would be thrilled. But he's going to lead us through a lot of really great information, and we're thrilled to have him. So take it away, Todd.
All right, can you hear me? Excellent. All right, a little bit technical issues. When I start my screen share, all my things went away in terms of being able to turn on volume. So thanks for having me. As Katie mentioned, I'm Todd Skelton. Been with TripAdvisor for over 10 years, and primarily work with destination marketing organizations and nonprofits. What I'm going to do is take you guys through a number of different insights. We'll do some Oregon-specific insights. We'll then carry on to some COVID insights that TripAdvisor has been collecting through our internal data, and also working with a marketing forum called Qualtrics, where we're doing customer sentiment data around how they're feeling about all the situation in travel. And then we'll end it with some really cool initiatives that we're putting forth for some of our partners. So diving into the data for Oregon, we see here we're looking at shared domestic users traffic to Oregon. And what we're doing is we're comparing that to some similar states, where we're comparing you guys against Washington, Idaho, Utah, Montana. Left California out of this just because their share in general is pretty heavy. Use a lot of this, but all in all, the share of domestic user traffic for Oregon compared to Washington, Idaho, Utah, Montana is up. As you can see, starting in May, Oregon is gaining some share and catching up with Washington. Next one we'll go over is looking at share of domestic bookings to Oregon. So Oregon receiving about a little over 2% estimated domestic bookings during July 2020 to date. The reason why we're looking at just July is now if things start to open up and loosen, this really gives us a basis that's going to be hopefully moving forward. As there was a lot of turbulence and kind of a roller coaster ride starting in March when it all started, and then following up to the middle of last month. Oregon's share of domestic bookings increased by 11% month over month versus January through June 2020 average. Oregon's also ranked #1 in share of estimated bookings for a second straight month. So as you can see, even though traffic compared to Washington, you guys were not quite there. You guys are actually receiving more bookings than of Washington. So Oregon also toppled Washington, Utah, Idaho, Montana by share double digits. So that is really interesting and cool to see. Now we look at year to date. Here are top states viewing Oregon content on TripAdvisor. This remained unchanged as we deal with the pandemic and going into recovery. So again, people within Oregon looking at Oregon content, people in Washington looking at Oregon content, California, Texas, Ohio, Idaho, Florida, Arizona, Utah, New York, and Illinois. Now we look at top cities in Oregon ranked by share of unique users. With this one, we're looking at January to date, so you really see, Portland's always taking that share. Then comes Oregon Coast, Central Coast, Bend, and so on. Then we look at what the previous slide showed. We looked at January to date. Now we're looking at January date compared to July, and you see, the parts that are gaining are more of the wider known spaces like the Oregon Coast, Central Oregon, and the folks that are falling off. Portland, and Eugene, Salem, some more of the bigger, broader cities are starting to see fall off, and as you see, more of the areas, remote areas are seeing some lift.
Hey Todd, you're breaking up just a little bit. It's not consistent, but just a heads up.
Gotcha. All right, let's see if I cut my video. My wife's probably got on a Zoom meeting for her work too, and it's just like sucking up bandwidth. So I hope you guys can hear me better now. So this site shows gains in page views of Oregon content on TripAdvisor from the start of the pandemic to last week. And this really shows you where the ebb and flows of what people are looking at in terms of accommodations, attractions, and restaurants. And you can see in the beginning, we're below average when we got that center mark line of 0%, really below average. And now everything's are starting to tick up and start to go below average. And then as we go into last couple of weeks, with the resurgence of destinations starting to lock down again, we're starting to see things plateau in terms of traffic. And this is, in particular to Oregon. Next slide is going to show you domestic users are booking trips to Oregon and all other states in the competitive set less than 30 days in advance. And that booking window has remained virtually unchanged month over month since we've been in this. The other piece we look at is the TripAdvisor forums and what people are saying in the forums about Oregon. Amazingly enough, for Oregon, it's remained unchanged, where people are actually looking for just general tips and advice about Oregon. A lot of key words that are coming up are Oregon, trip, drive, open, and lake. This is interesting because with a lot of other destinations, a lot of stuff that's coming up in conversations are all centered around the pandemic and what's open or what is closed. So it's really interesting to see that when we compare last year versus this year, a lot of the conversations remain unchanged and people are just looking for general trips. Next, I'll take you guys through some COVID insights that we're doing here at TripAdvisor, and then some insights around traveler sentiment. So 4 months ago, the World Health Organization declared COVID a general pandemic. Governments across the world implemented lockdowns, travel had halted, consumers felt uncertainty. 4 months later, we're seeing positive signs of recovery across a handful of markets. I'll highlight the recovery and put this important note that not all markets are in the same phase today. Some are still seeing spikes in cases, some experiencing them for the first time, and others are lifting lockdowns after months of restrictions. All right, today we're going to go through and define 5 stages of recovery, review domestic trends in general. We're seeing uptick in activity across North America, EMEA, APAC. South America, however, isn't as many countries within are seeing increases in COVID cases. So we'll dive into these five phases of recovery. we're happy to say globally that the decline is past us. That was the phase where travel came to a hard stop as governments mandated lockdowns. Some countries are still in the plateau phase, where consumers are staying indoors in an effort to flatten the curve. Emerges a phase where lockdowns begin to ease, consumers visit local restaurants and businesses. We know that there's a shift to domestic travel first. So that is the first of travel. In the domestic phase, consumers will take local weekend trips. We're certainly seeing road trips become more popular, as Mo and Katy mentioned earlier. We're also seeing the last phase is international travel. Will likely not going to happen until next year. This is where consumers are going to travel abroad for international trips. And taking a look at a regional level, we're going to look at North America. In the past few weeks, COVID cases have begun to increase in some states in the US. As a result, traffic, which is increasing constantly, saw a slight dip and since plateaued. With that said, US domestic lookers were still up 198% last week versus the week of April 5th. Booking window has also continued to decline, decreasing by 5 days in the first half of July on an average of 28 days. Within the US, outdoor attractions continue to be the large share, currently about 48% of attraction page views. Despite an increase in COVID cases, overall domestic attractions are up 17% in the first 2 weeks of July versus the first 2 weeks in June. In the last 2 weeks in the US, 67% of domestic hotel searches were for 30 days or sooner. Only 13% of those searches were for 3 months and out, meaning consumers are searching for a hotel and booking for trips within the month. In the first 2 weeks of July, Martha's Vineyard, Hershey saw the largest increase in traffic from the US lookers. Las Vegas, Jersey Shore continue to have the largest volume, with North Carolina mountains popping up in the second half of July. And we're really seeing a lot of destinations pop on our site that are kind of off the beaten path. A funny story to quickly elaborate on is that my sister lives in Stinson Beach, California, which is up above San Francisco, and I live in Santa Cruz, California, which is a pretty popular tourist destination. I went and visited my sister and noticed that their beaches were totally overcrowded. Their hiking trails were truly impacted. And these are an area where it's not well known within California. Whereas in the same weekend, I had neighbors telling me that the beaches of Santa Cruz were actually not as packed as we thought they would be. So it's really interesting to see that our data is lining up and seeing it in real time that people are going to unknown areas or off the beaten path areas. And you'll see that with some of the destinations that pop on this list, which aren't ones that are really popular, but are ones that are more of those off beaten path places. And then we look at top 20 points of interest in the United States in the first half of July. The top 3 points of interest in the US last month were outdoors, supporting the shift to outdoor trips. What's interesting is how the makeup of these points of interest is our East Coast. As that area of the nation seem to be loosening up on the restrictions, people are traveling to nearby places and off the beaten path. Next piece I'll take you through is some latest consumer sentiment data fielded by our last 10 days of June across the United States, United Kingdom, Italy, Australia, Japan, and Singapore. And this was done through a company we work with called Qualtrics. First, we wanted to look back at where have consumers been getting travel information from during the pandemic. We know travel is down, but travel sites still do get about 1 billion visits monthly. Looking across the US, UK, Italy, Australia, Japan, and Singapore, we see that consumers are 62% more likely to have tuned to TripAdvisor for travel information in the last 90 days. This is reflective of April, May, and June. Based off our first-party data, we know consumers are booking domestic trips. We asked consumers when the next trip was, and we see that more than 1 in 3 report that have a domestic trip booked for July or August, with the number being slightly higher for TripAdvisor users in August. There is noticeable dip in bookings in October and November, and it goes back to the idea that consumers are afraid of the second wave of COVID.
Todd, you're varying in volume quite a bit. And so we're able to hear all of that, but I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, now I'll scoot a little closer to my screen, see if that helps out. The next piece is how long are these trips? 57% of consumers report their next domestic trip will be between 3 to 9 days, but for TripAdvisor users, the trip length is a little longer. 54% of TripAdvisor users say their next trip will be between 6 to 14 days. Why we see people travel? We see here that consumers say that to visit friends, family, for prior commitments, or they will travel for a holiday weekend. Make sure to ask about time spent planning or researching travel again. 73% of consumers report having spent time in the last week planning or researching a potential trip, and that number is up to 89% for TripAdvisor users. We have breakouts on the right of each market tested as well. So getting into our market initiatives, we know consumers are more likely to take a local trip, near home, a road trip, or outdoor trip, those trips they took before the pandemic. We'll dive into road trips. So 48% of consumers say they are excited to plan their next road trip, which will likely be with family only. We're seeing some consumers prefer 3 to 5 day window and others prefer 6 to 14 days. People are likely falling into 2 buckets, a weekend getaway or replacing a longer trip with a longer road trip. When planning road trips, consumers are turning to travel sites to learn about road closures, accommodations, restaurant recommendations, attractions, packing lists. We have plenty of those robust lists here. There are definitely a demand for this information. We'll talk about outdoor trips. So 48% of consumers say they are excited to plan their next outdoor trip. And we are seeing consumers report that they are taking those trips either with family or friends. Similar to road trips, we wanted to get a sense of what would be helpful for consumers when planning these trips. They're looking for health and safety tips, recommendations for kids, and packing guides. Again, we have another fairly robust list here. Then we'll take a dive into local trips. The third initiative is looking at local trips, similar to other formats. We have excitement factor, as well as who consumers will travel with for the trip. Nearly half here say it will be family only. And consumers are looking for restaurants and accommodation recommendations as well as itineraries for these trips. Then we could touch on good stories. So we have a fourth initiative which we focus on good stories. Travelers value being able to support Black-owned businesses, local businesses, LGBT, owned businesses. TripAdvisor owned indexes for these 3 points, which is really great to see. Some of this data is a refresh and some is new, but consumers are looking for positive stories right now. They also want to learn about the initiatives brands and destinations are taking on right now. As you can see as some of this information, you've got things that people have said in some of our surveys is, I want to hear positive stories. So much negative news in the world. I find myself looking for positive stories. I want to learn about initiatives destinations are taking on. I want to hear about positive stories from brands. I want a sense of community is more important to me than ever has been before. And we'll learn about initiatives that brands are taking. So right now, this is really important for consumers.
Sorry, Todd. In good news, we have so much information that we are running a little bit long. But just wanted to acknowledge it is 1 o'clock and that we will send out the recording if people do need to hop off, but we're going to finish the presentation and have some time for Q&A. But just apologies that we're running a little bit long, but it's very good news. We have so much information.
And with that, we'll cover off real quick and wrap this up here is the initiatives TripAdvisor is taking on around travel, called the Travel Safety Initiative. Safety is top of mind for a lot of travelers. And in our surveys, it's, of a sentiment survey we had, 65% respondents will not travel until they see physical change that make them feel safer. 4% of travelers say a checklist of safety measures on TripAdvisor listings would be very or extremely important. And so enters the TripAdvisor Safety Initiative on June 24th, we launched this new program, putting travelers' minds at ease while prioritizing their safety and supporting our partners. Leveraging expertise from the World Health and Safety Organizations, compiling checklists that hotels or restaurants could use to share safety measures. Businesses that activate the checklist will benefit from listing page updates, search filtering, and then traveler reviews. For now, while we wait for the travel rebound and enough to begin collecting travel sentiment, we will rely on you, the business owners, to provide information to our travel community about what you're doing to keep them safe. We've launched our first iteration with hotels and restaurants, as some of you may have already known. And here's a sample of the listing. Here shows search filter in red and traveler review in yellow to add more details around safety for the businesses they recently frequented. There's also a checklist of things that a hotel can list, from staff requiring to wash hands regularly to having doctors available 24/7. These are all part of a checklist that you have to be able to put as part of your listing. Here's a sample for restaurants, where you can list that face masks are required for all staff in public areas, all the way down to pay stay-at-home policies, or for you to let consumers know about pay stay-at-home policies for your staff with symptoms, to just give that, that good feeling that you're looking out for the consumer. And then with best practices, 1, select a safety measure that applies to your business. 2, use the free-form text box to provide more details. 3, update information regularly. And then the opportunity, as a partner of TripAdvisor, with this free opportunity to rebuild traveler confidence, position your business, and leverage reach and scale. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Katy.
Thanks, Todd. It was really helpful information, and I think something that I want to make sure that is clear too is we're seeing a lot of that mirrored in information that's been really popular on TravelOregon.com. So as we've been through the pandemic, some of our most high trafficked pages, and Bryan can fact check me on this, but it's been information about the travel alerts page. People are really hungry for that information about how to take a safe trip. So making sure that you have that, really recommend, and then updating that regularly, and at least indicating at some level that it has it up to date as of da-da-da date. The other thing is that we've also seen a lot of people looking for resource to official travel destination pages. Our traffic, and I have this earlier, and we can send out the official, but we have seen in the younger demographics, we're talking like 18 to 35, those percentages of usage have gone up on TravelOregon.com. Just again, as I think people are looking for a little bit more firm information as they plan their trip. As we continue to move forward, just where we want to wrap up, again, this is kind of the thing that we always reinforce, but Travel Oregon staff is meeting weekly with the regional destination management organizations. They are sharing a ton of really great information. We have regional updates each week. This is a great resource. If you have not connected with your RDMO, we really encourage you to do so. The other level is working with DMOs. As we know that consumers are hungry and will be continuing to look for more nuanced information as they plan a trip to a destination, the DMO is more important than ever. And again, as Travel Oregon is sharing information, that's resources that we continue to look at as well. So making sure you're just connected along the way. And then last slide. So just kind of summarizing, the communication is key. Please remember to send updates to any information to Otis at TravelOregon.com. There's features that have been updated to also indicate any new steps taken within COVID, changes to business hours, and then of course, if there's any deals, promotions, or new products or services. And then this is the biggest thing, is just continuing to communicate with visitors and the community about what to expect. One, working with your community of what your tourism business is doing within COVID to promote community health, and then to visitors, what can they expect? How have you taken these steps? If there's any changes to operations, and then of course, as Todd was indicating earlier, people are really hungry to see those steps. You have your staff washing their hands. Those small things can seem pretty basic, but we know make a really big difference. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sorry that we went a little bit over, and the Travel Oregon team, and I'm not sure if Todd can or not, but we're able to stay on for some Q&A.
Perfect. So Katy, I'm going to throw out the first one to you. One of the questions that is coming up pretty frequently is around any updates or perspectives on the out-of-state traveler restrictions that are coming up, or just access to the state and closing borders. Any perspective?
Yes. We are currently working with the Oregon Health Authority and the governor's office to confirm if any specific information about those restrictions. Right now, it still is a work in progress, and as soon as we have any updates, we will share that information through an industry e-news. But yes, we're very aware, and the team is working closely with the governor's office to understand what that means.
Perfect, that's really helpful. In addition, I also see a great question of any data or resources that we point people to around small corporate incentive group travel. What are they looking to see in some? And the additional part to that question was the timeline, if that's available.
I'm sorry, Alexa, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
The question was around if there's any data on small corporate incentive group travel.
Oh, that's a great question. Bryan, do you have any information around that we could look at?
At this point, we don't have a lot of data to kind of back that up or to really provide any insight in there, but that's something that we can definitely try to get a little bit more data on.
Perfect, that's helpful. One other question that is also coming up is around if you can speak more towards just the value of sustainability messaging, how that's coming through Travel Oregon, and how that should float out into regions, into communities.
Sure. As we, the recommendations with COVID that you should be focusing on outdoor recreation, we know that it's more important than ever to have a responsible recreation message. And so what our experience and how Travel Oregon works with our partners, like we said, the Office of Outdoor Recreation, Oregon State Parks, is to have that as a consistent drumbeat when you're sharing information out. We are continuing to meet with Kaylin in the Office of Outdoor Recreation to participate on, I'm going to get the name of this wrong, but it's the biweekly Oregon, it's essentially the biweekly Oregon recreation calls to understand what are the new issues that are facing coming up in outdoor recreation, determining what the tourism message is with that, and then either updating Take Care Out There assets and information to share, or working with our regional partners to share information that comes up about that. But that's something we definitely see the value in, and that will be part of our evolution for a paid effort this late summer into fall as well.
Katy, we also have another question coming in from our friends down in Klamath Falls. They're wondering if we are currently doing any advertising in California, or what our plan is for advertising kind of out of state for all the people who are coming in from NorCal.
Right. So this is interesting. And so we actually were just confirming this week, is so because Travel Oregon is really going to be focusing with our travel safe messages, setting the expectations, we are looking to have that information be advertised in Northern California. Exactly what partners or what tactics that's executed in, but we have an interest in getting safety information, responsible recreation messaging, and information that Travel Oregon is a resource, and also pointing to some of our tourism partners in Southern Oregon as places where people can find out more information. So when we were, so yes is the answer, that we will be looking at that, but it will not be a travel now, book now message. It will be a safe travel, here's resource and information if you do take a trip into Oregon message.
All right, Katy, we got another question coming in. I'm going to pass this over to either Mo or Katy. What is Travel Oregon doing right now to help make our visitors feel more safe, especially for the diverse traveler coming in or traveling to or within the state?
Yeah, we're actually a number of things. One is looking at our base of contributors, right? So looking at who's telling those stories on our site. So whether it's an influencer or writers or videographers, making sure that we're working with a diverse group of folks. We're also tackling kind of, you know, given the incident in Lincoln City and others that have come up, tackling the kind of the challenge of traveling while Black. We have a couple of stories coming out that tackles that issue in the next month or so. We're also supporting Black-owned businesses, both a Portland-focused story and also a story focused on a statewide travel. And again, you know, it's a kind of a multiple fronts. It's not just the content, but it's also kind of forging relationships with organizations and groups that are actually involved in the community and kind of telling that story from their perspective, you know, versus a Travel Oregon perspective, really. So again, forging a lot of relationships, kind of like we did with the OSC campaign, you know, working with communities of color and folks from diverse groups who are taking people outside and getting their perspective on how they would like to be portrayed in the work that we do.
All right, well, with that, we'd like to thank you all very, very much for your time. This is something that we've been really anxious to do and just trying to get all the information correct. This has been recorded and we'll be sending this out. We will continue to follow up on the Q&A that we did not get to it will be communicated. I'm not sure, I think it's probably email. And then that will also be posted on the industry site as well. But please, if you have not, can't say it enough, sign up for our industry e-news. You'll get more information about additional webinars and trainings that will be coming up from Travel Oregon and partners. And it'll also have information about our marketing plans as we continue to evolve. And then lastly, that's also where you get my very favorite report, which is the data insights that goes out weekly that LaDan and Bryan manage. And it's really helpful as you make decisions about where to go with our limited marketing dollars. So thank you all very much. And please let us know any questions.